not their ethics, but
their Mennonite faith. Yes, they're pacifists.
Yeah.
So by their tenets of their particular religion, and I'm very, very familiar with those stories from people in my wife's family and extended family, and what they did and how they decided to serve. And for Randy, that obviously would curtail any ambitions of maybe taking his miling career to further heights, but he would endeavor to make sure that when he graduated from college, he would be able to serve in the military, but do so in a way that would certainly help out quite a bit, but wouldn't be on the battlefront.
Right. Well, he was on the battlefront. He was in the Pacific Theater.
Right.
He was in the Signal Corps.
Right.
Because of his background in science, he was he was able to get a degree, and he was a good athlete, and so he was able to work a deal with the Army and become an officer, enter as an officer and in the Signal Corps.
Right.
He played several roles in that way. He was part of, preliminary right out of the training program, he was part of not the spy program, but they did communications between the East Coast and the war front in Europe, and they were kind of responsible for making that all run all the time. So he was a communications officer there. And then when they would go on their invasions in different islands in the South Pacific, the Signal Corps had to go in first. They had to be able to set up the communication lines right away. That was a really important job. And on that one landing, he lost his helmet in the soup and ended up taking the boat all the way to the shore without a helmet on. So.
Yeah, I guess what I was saying is he didn't become an infantryman. He certainly was in the battle and the action as well as, and World War II is a long conflict, and it creates a different dynamic in people's lives, and it would create a turn in his life, and the aspect of his life that was about athletics would turn in a completely different direction to one as a typical American story where somebody's carving out a successful life once the service that they have given to their country concludes.
Yeah, growing up, we never heard thing one about him being a great athlete. It just was something he'd already put in the background. He was raising a family of 4 kids and all that was involved in there. And he was also one of his loves was teaching school, and so he opted, instead of becoming a police officer, to become a school teacher when he finished college.
So he did do that, and he would eventually take that in a completely wonderful direction. And but he was a complete jack of all trades, also.
Yes, very much so. He taught high school, and he started in Montezuma, and then he outside of Dodge City. Then he was in Dodge briefly, and came back to Wichita and taught in junior highs and high schools there. He actually worked at Boeing or Beach. He worked at one of the aircraft companies at the same time he taught all day. So he would teach a shift, and then he would work the overnight shift at the aircraft manufacturing. And a lot of teachers did that at that time. It was just a good way to carve out some money as you were trying to get your life going again. Eventually, he went with teaching full-time, and then he wound up his career teaching in Beloit. But it was during his time in Wichita that he developed something he called Look and Learn, which is kind of like hands-on education that we have today, where instead of just being lectured to, you actually get up and do something, and then you write. You do an experiment, and then you write about what you've learned from that experiment. So Look and Learn was very popular, and he became part of a project called Chem Study, which there's not a whole lot written about, but it actually changed the way they taught chemistry in high schools in the United States in the early 60s. And that was a big breakthrough to be part of the research on that. And as a result of that, actually, his wife wrote the application for him to be a Fulbright scholar, and so he was part of the Fulbright exchange grant program, education exchange grant program, and which is just a rarity for a high school teacher to be part of anything Fulbright. But he took his entire family, except their oldest son, to Kenya for a year, and he taught in a school over there. Look and learn in Africa.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
Hey Kansas City, Joe Spiker, Easton Roofing back for another beautiful springtime in Kansas City. We are proud to announce our renewed partnership with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Kansas City. Starting in 2024, a portion of every job sold will be donated to a cause close to my heart. I was a big, and I encourage you to volunteer. And if you hire us for service on your residential or commercial roof, you'll know that a portion of the profits will go to a great cause. So call us at 913-257-5426. Easton Roofing. Integrity matters.
Always great to catch up with Dr. Brad Whittle of Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture. Everybody wants to make every year a great one, mentally and physically, and certainly ASFCA can help in that regard.
Chiropractic, acupuncture, physiotherapies. We're going to address the body and the mind to keep you in great shape. With winter moving into spring, we don't want to have the opportunity to get hurt or to be slow and not do what we used to do, right?
Absolutely right, and you can do that in a variety of ways.
We can. We love looking at the body and how it moves, looking at the posture and how it holds us to be strong, to be safe, and really to help us do those things we love to do.
The wide variety and range of services you can get helps in that regard at Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture. 7 locations all around the Kansas City area. Find the one that's most convenient for you. And for more information, visit asfca.com/Danny. That's asfca.com/Danny. If you'd like to join these and other fine sponsors and market your business to Kansas City's #1 variety podcast, contact us at danny@dannyclinkscale.com. Look forward to working with you. Our guest is Greg Peters. His book is The Galloping Goose from Goessel, and we are picking up the tale or continuing the tale in Africa. And there are actually, this is sort of where it doesn't come full circle, but running sort of becomes part of the tale again, because as you're talking with Larry, and Larry's voice is a big part of this book, he's over there in Kenya for a part of his life, a year of his life. He was a well-accomplished runner as well, and watched these Kenyans with no training whatsoever burn 10 miles without any training.
Larry was saying his dad told him, well, you should do this all-comers meet. In Africa in those days, they would do that, and I think they still do it, all-comers meets. And he said, you should give it a try. And Larry thought, well, I was a good runner in high school. I should do that. He was at, I can't remember which one of the Wichita high schools, but anyway, he did what an American would do. He did his training, and he asked one of the students, he goes, well, when are you guys going to start training? And they said, oh, soon, we'll do it. Maybe the day before. And he thought, oh, I'm just going to wipe up on these guys. And we got to the track, and there were 30 that started and 29 that finished in front of him. And he said he ran a time that would have been the junior class best time for his high school. I can't remember what the time was, but it was very impressive.
I think it was like 4:30. Yeah, it was a good time. And these guys are running, just over 4 minutes, all of them. And, but their training was natural training. They just ran everywhere, right? Right.
That's it. Larry worked at a little concession thing in the school, and if they needed a notebook or a pencil, they would come there and buy it. But sometimes he didn't have it, and I think he said it was 5 or 10 miles to the nearest town. And the kids would just get up and run and get a pencil and run back and be back in class in time for back in school in time for class. So yeah, it was just part of their lifestyle.
But it is such an American story as well, and it's told about Randy. You talked about working in an aircraft plant, and you talk about teaching and developing this chem program, which is such a integral part of learning in the 1960s. He also was a Fuller Brush man and a salesman and things like that.
Larry will tell you that he was a born salesman, probably a better salesman than anything else he did in his life. And Larry likes to tell the story about Randy always told him, his dad always told him, when you go door to door, every house is a potential sale. So they went door to door in Wichita so he could learn all about it in high school. And Larry was like a typical teenager. He wanted to go to every house as quickly as And Randy just loved to get women out on the porch and just talk them up. Well, one particular time, Larry skipped the house because there was a day sleeper sign in the window. There was a third shift worker there. And Randy just didn't think he'd given enough effort. So he went up and knocked on the door, and the woman in the house came to the door and just dressed him down pretty quick and said, "Can't you read the sign?" And so when Randy got back to the car, Larry goes, "Well, guess every house is a sale, huh, Dad?" About a month later, they were back in the same neighborhood, and Larry did the same thing, skipped that house, but Randy just scooped up these really nice brushes that they had, hair brushes, and went up and tapped on the door, and the woman came out, and he just said, "I apologize for how rude we were the last time, and I did notice that you would probably appreciate these hairbrushes, which are on sale, 2 for $10. They're usually $10 a piece." And he didn't come back to the car until about an hour later with a $200 order in his pocket. Larry used that same technique to teach. He had all sorts of international. He works in supply chain, or worked in supply chain production and things like that in Europe. But he used that same technique to teach all these superstar salespeople how to do it, and they didn't know that they were getting it from a school teacher that grew up in a one-room schoolhouse in the middle of Kansas.
That is for sure. I when you're diving into this, and the book has to go into areas, as you say, as a reporter and somebody who is doing research, where sometimes you're relying on sort of hearsay, and other times you do have solid information and it's reflected in the book, where there's times of great miles that are recorded and everything, but a lot of it is a combination of American folk tales and real research.
That's exactly it. The more you're involved in documentary kind of stories, the more you find out that even the big boys kind of have to fill in some gaps, or history's written by the winners, and there's always a whole other story. Even when you look at the expert people like Ken Burns, they'll tell you, there's just times when you hit the wall as far as information. That's kind of where Larry kind of came in as far as the voice, as putting a voice to the story, as I could kind of use him to hedge my bets a little bit on things. There were several stories that Larry told me that I just could not substantiate. There was one particular story about when Randy coached in Montezuma in western Kansas, that he was the coach there, and they actually had one black athlete on the team, and they had arranged for a dinner in a town after a track meet, and they'd actually prepaid for it. And when they got there to the restaurant after the track meet, the waitress made the black kid sit in the kitchen and eat his food, and Larry just brought the entire team, or Randy just brought the entire team back to the kitchen and started ordering their dinner back there. And the owner of the store, or the restaurant, came up and said, "Well, what are you guys doing here?" And Randy just told them, "We compete as a team, we eat as a team." And they got kicked out of there and ate somewhere else. But I got as close as finding there was a family of blacks, a black family that lived in Montezuma area at that time. But it's 80 some years ago, and most of the people have died now, so there's not too much left of the story.
But he had incidents like that a couple of times in his life. One when he was much younger, that it had a great impact on him, and I think he was very happy in the end to have lived to a time when an African American was president.
Yes, when he was on the trip, they went across the ocean to the war on one of the ships, and he got seasick right away, and he had some black troops in his command, and some of their leaders, their officers, came up, and they just took control of his. They took orders from him. He was laying in his cot. He could not move. He would get up and he'd get sick before he hit the floor. So they just carried him. They carried the day, and that just changed his opinion of black people from then on. He was kind of a champion of their causes.
Mm-hmm. He absolutely was, and it was a full circle moment in his life. And there's a lot of full circles in this particular book. You must be proud of being able to tell this tale and have it be such an interesting one. And last year they named put a plaque up at the football field in Goessel, and there's going to be a big day coming up, and some other things that are maybe rekindling the memory of the Galloping Goose from Goessel.